Ahead tonight, a physical confrontation inside the House of Assembly. Who was involved and what the Speaker had to say.
Also ahead, a man found floating at Potter's Key. We'll tell you what police know so far.
And what victory for Belinda Wilson will mean for the Bahamas Union of Teachers. The National Report starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This segment of the news is brought to you by BTC, powered by Lime.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Keishla Adderley.
And I'm Kendino Knowles. As always, it's good to have you with us.
Topping the news tonight, Long Island Member of Parliament Loretta Butler Turner slapped Fort Charlotte Member of Parliament Andre Rollins inside the House of Assembly today after the two had an exchange inside the chamber of the House of Assembly this afternoon.
Butler Turner was quoted as saying that Rollins put his arm around her and said, quote, nasty things. That's when Butler asked him to remove his arm from around her twice. When he didn't, she said she slapped him.
Now, Rollins denies saying anything nasty and said instead he claims he told Butler Turner, quote, that she needed help before he was slapped.
Now, Rollins says he doesn't intend to press charges. The argument was reportedly a carryover from a discussion in Parliament over conditions at the Willie Mae Pratt Center for Girls. After the House resumed this afternoon, the Speaker of the House, the Honorable Dr. Kendall Major, cautioned House members about their conduct.
If we as honorable men and women are to be calling for reduced violence on our streets and among our people, then we in this House must demonstrate it clearly that we can disagree with each other without being insulting and unparliamentary. Words do hurt. I've seen it time and time again in this place, and it's bothersome. In particular, words that are spoken from members from the apparent security of their seats.
A Supreme Court justice sentenced Prince Hepburn to 60 years in prison today for the shocking hacking death of his romantic interest, Miss Nellie Brown Cox.
Now today, our Jiminita Swain was in court for the sentencing, during which time the trial judge explained the key determining factor in her decision.
There was no visible reaction from murder convict Prince Hepburn when he was sentenced to serve 57 years in prison for the murder of his former lover, Nellie Brown Cox. Hepburn was convicted in March for murder. The death penalty was not sought in the case. Justice Indra Charles, in her summation, said one thing in the evidence from another witness which stuck out was that Hepburn could have walked away from the relationship just as he did from his wife and children. She said Hepburn did not express any remorse, nor did he take responsibility for his actions. Despite the reports presented by previous witnesses that describe Hepburn as honest, good-natured, and mild-mannered, Justice Charles concluded that he was a danger to society and said the court must send a strong message that criminality will not be tolerated. With that, Hepburn was sentenced to 60 years in prison, which was reduced to 57 years, minusing the 3 years already spent in jail. Hepburn's attorney, Muriel DeSille, in his mitigation plea, told the court that his client is 51 years old and has never run afoul of the law. He said the Crown did not present anything to suggest Hepburn's responsibility was not diminished. Brown Cox, the former president of the Bahamas Heart Association, was found dead in an apartment on Bougainville Boulevard, South Beach, with multiple stab wounds. Both she and Hepburn were involved in an extramarital affair. Outside of court, Clementina Brown says the sentence won't bring her sister back, and the family does not want an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth, and they've already forgiven Hepburn. She said now her sister can finally rest in peace, and they're happy with the sentence. But she's concerned that Hepburn never showed any remorse for the crime. Also outside of court, Attorney DeSille did not comment on the sentence, but said more emphasis should have been placed on Hepburn's mental health.
We're not saying that he should have gone with impunity. That does not really arise. But he ought not to be punished in the normal course of things because the circumstances We're not normal.
Attorney Jusil says an appeal has already been filed against the conviction of Prince Hebron in the death of Nellie Brown Cox. Jimenita Swain, ZNS Network News.
Police have released the identity of the woman found dead in waters at Montague Beach on Friday. She is 39-year-old Lillian Williams of Town Court Apartments, Nassau Street. Williams' body was discovered on the shoreline east of the Nassau Sailing Club with multiple stab wounds. Meantime, police are continuing investigations into an alleged drowning after the body of a man was pulled from waters at Potter's Dock yesterday afternoon. The deceased was discovered floating near the eastern end of the dock shortly before 5 o'clock. A crowd of spectators gathered at the scene as police carried out their investigations. Now the victim's identity has not been released, and police say they don't suspect foul play. A 26-year-old male of Marsh Harbor, Abaco is in police custody after being found in possession of 4.5 pounds of suspected marijuana. Officers of the airport police station arrested the man around 4:20 on Tuesday in the domestic section of the Linden-Pinling International Airport. The drugs have an estimated street value of $4,500. Active police investigations continue. Minister of Transport, the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin, focused on crime during the introduction of her presentation. She urged Bahamians to become the solution to vexing crime in the country by starting with themselves and members of their households.
The negative circumstances we have faced in the last few years, this economic tornado that has left devastation in its wake, suffering of our people, and a seemingly unrelenting wave of violence have created the conditions for what might be called the perfect storm in our country. This is what has come together, Mr. Speaker. And this may be a simplistic summary of what has transpired in the last few years in the lives of our people. But I am seeking to illustrate, Mr. Speaker, the utter hardship and turbulence our country has seen. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that despite that, there are still signs of alleviation and recovery happening in this country.
Armed robberies of tourists, the assault of an embassy staffer, and the murder of an American visitor have all grabbed headlines in recent weeks. Leader of the opposition, Dr. Hubert Minnis, warns that crime against tourists could have some serious implications for our #1 industry.
That, I think, will have some repercussions, especially if these types of attack continues. And unless the government or unless the Bahamas takes control and deal with the crime issue, then it's going to affect the health sector, it's going to affect the educational sector, it's going to affect the social service, it's going to affect everything. And our quality of life will deteriorate. I don't think we're looking at the complete manifestation and the ballooning of this entity and what can happen.
Mr. Minnis called on the government to partner with the opposition and all stakeholders in order to deal with crime appropriately. Construction now underway in Mayaguana since the airport aviation tragedy there. Minister of Transport and Aviation, the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin, confirmed this during her contribution to the budget debate. She also advised the House that the opening of the Marsh Harbor Airport will be pushed back to the end of August.
Minister of Labor, the Honorable Shane Gibson, says the government's current budget is cleaning up what he calls the mess left by the former administration. Gibson said the F&M mismanaged public finances and had a poor record of economic management. Minister Gibson gave this breakdown in the numbers.
2013 budget fashioned by the outgoing government against the backdrop of fiscal mismanagement, high budget deficits, and escalating debt burdens. Mr. Speaker, the state of public finances was in a virtual mess, marked by declining revenue and runaway expenses. It was, Mr. Speaker, a recipe for disaster. Indeed, the F&M government's budget performance got progressively worse year after year. For instance, at the beginning of the F&M's administration, its budgetary deficit stood at approximately $151 million. However, during fiscal period 2008-2009, the F&M budget deficit increased by some $210 million to to a whopping $361.3 million.
Bold, aggressive, and comprehensive. That's how the Member of Parliament for Yamacraw is describing the government's 2013-2014 budget. A budget, she says, expresses the heart of a caring government to wash every tear from every eye and to provide for all those vulnerable among us, primarily as her ministry is at the forefront in assisting those in need. Carla Palmer reports.
In excess of $20 million were spent during the last fiscal period between July 1st and May 31st this year on various programs by the Ministry of Social Services and Community Development. Minister and Member of Parliament for Yamacraw, the Honorable Melanie Griffin, relayed in detail the ongoing work in the various departments of her ministry and others being blueprinted, like significant renovations to the Simpson Penn School for Boys and the William A. Pratt Center for Girls. The works will be carried out at a cost of $838,000 for the Boys Center, and the Girls facility is still being assessed.
These include the following: construction of a new security booth at the entrance, repairs to the roof of the multipurpose building which houses the kitchen and dining room, new security bars and doors, electrical upgrades in cottages, including the installation of tamper-resistant lights.
Other initiatives in the pipeline include the Cash for Transfer program, to not only be implemented here in New Providence, but Grand Bahama, Eleuthera, and Cat Island. This plan will consolidate a number of existing programs. A multi-sectoral task force to address the problems of gender-based and domestic violence has also been established. Additionally, consideration is being given to enacting legislation that will make parents and guardians more accountable in the rearing of their children. A proposed solution, Minister Griffin anticipates, will alleviate much of the social ills in our country, like the unfortunate reality of child abuse.
13, in New Providence, there were 181 cases of reported child abuse. In Grand Bahama, there were 107 cases for a total of 288 cases.
Because of the downturn in the economy, Minister Griffin explains that the volume of customers to the Social Services Department has increased, resulting in delays at times. However, she says they are working to improve the process. I'm Carla Palmer for ZNS Network News.
In our first look at whether that mid-level trough will continue to fire up showers and thunderstorms, which will be heavy at times over the northwest Bahamas, but outside of our studios just now, we have cloudy skies, temperature, if we can just go back, temperature 84 degrees, relative humidity 79%. Your winds are out of the southeast at around 3 knots, barometric pressure 1,017.3 millibars at 30.03 inches and steady. But stay tuned, temperatures around the 5 Minute Island, travel and boating forecast is still to come.
And still ahead, the nation's leaders address the Baptist National Convention opening. You're watching the Bahamas Tonight.
And the cleanup is underway in Pinewood Gardens. We've got the latest.
My proudest moment being a Bahamian, I think, might have to be on August 10th. I had the opportunity to travel to London and to be a spectator at the games, and for me, the entire experience was, for me, flying my flag and wearing my colors was an extremely proud moment to be in another country and representing where I was from. And everybody was there celebrating in the spirit of being Bahamian, eating Bahamian food, drinking a gumbe punch. We were just having fun. But I think what capped the entire experience off was when it was time for the last race of the games, the men's 4x400 relay. We were holding our breaths. We were excited, and when Ramon Miller got the baton, and in that last 100 meters, he ran down the guy from the United States, it was like a burst of energy. It was Bahamian pride at its finest. You couldn't pay for that moment. In that moment, I can truly say that I was very proud to be Bahamian. Happy 40th Independence, Bahamas.
This portion of the news is brought to you by Shell Healing.